Elizabeth Morgan was signing the divorce papers with steady hands but a trembling heart, as if each written letter were a rope cut between the past and the present. The registry office smelled of old dust and formality, a grey environment where even the pictures on the wall seemed to watch in silence. The pen seemed to weigh tons, and each movement left a trace of sadness that only she could see. The silence was almost too respectful, like a contained sigh of fate. It was the end of something that had already ended before it was officially concluded. She had already prepared herself for that moment, or thought she had. She spent weeks talking to herself, rehearsing what she would do, how she would dress, what tone of voice she would use. She knew that at some point that day would come. The pain of the past few months, the silences interspersed at home, the absence that was present even when he was there. All of this already pointed to the inevitable outcome. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could prepare her for what she would see when the door opened. Her husband Thomas entered, hand in hand with Isabel, and in that instant, time seemed to stop. The thin air weighed heavily in her lungs. A piercing chill travelled up her spine and settled in her stomach, as if all her organs were compressed in shock. It wasn't a surprise, but it was still devastating. It was the confirmation of a silent intuition she had insisted on ignoring. She knew Isabel, a mutual friend, a recurring presence at parties, gatherings, weekend barbecues. She always had a strange feeling about her, a discomfort she could never explain. She thought it was just jealousy or silly insecurity, a paranoia she didn't want to feed. But at that moment, everything made sense. The looks between them, the silent complicity, now too obvious to be denied. How had she not seen it before? Thomas looked at her briefly, an expression mixing defiance and guilt, before diverting his eyes to the papers on the table. Isabel, in turn, tried to muster a conciliatory smile that only made everything more painful. Elizabeth felt the bitter taste of betrayal flood her mouth. "You are early," said Thomas, as if it were just a casual meeting. Elizabeth did not reply. She finished signing the documents with a calmness she didn't know she possessed. She stood up, adjusted the brown coat she was wearing, the same one she wore the day they met, an irony only she would understand, and left without looking back. The walk to the car was the longest journey she had ever taken. Each step echoed on the cold floor, marking the rhythm of a heart that hadn't yet realized it could continue beating even when broken. She got into the vehicle, closed the door, and only then allowed the tears to come. Silent, warm, uncontrollable. In the days that followed, the pain took over like a dark, dense wave. It wasn't just sadness. It was grief. For the story she lived, for the dreams that didn't come true, for the promises that had been silently broken. On the first night, between sobs and the muffled sound of her own crying, Elizabeth heard the doorbell ring. The simple, almost trivial sound rang like an alarm in the middle of the night. It was Caroline, her longtime friend, a companion from youth, from nights of pizza and confessions, of easy laughter and understanding silences. She entered without saying anything, just hugged her, a long, tight embrace that demanded no explanations. They stayed there, in silence, with Elizabeth collapsing in her arms, her body trembling and her soul in pieces. Caroline didn't try to fix anything. She didn't offer ready-made advice, nor did she say that everything would pass. She was just there, whole, available, firm as a rock in the middle of the storm. The next day, seeing her still desolate, with swollen eyes and an exhausted soul, she said firmly, "You need to breathe. Let's get you out of here for a while." Elizabeth hesitated. Breathe. It seemed impossible. Everything in her was trapped, locked, frozen. But Caroline had already begun to plan a trip, determined as only she could be. In less than 24 hours, her friend had organised everything: dates, locations, accommodation possibilities, each detail thought out with care. She said it would be a gift. Plan the vacation. Leave the rest to me." Elizabeth, still with red eyes, felt a spark of hope for the first time. She didn't know if she could find herself, but she decided to give a chance to a fresh start, even if it was just to move away from the pain. While packing, she found a box of mementos she kept in the back of her closet. Photographs of happy moments with Thomas, love letters yellowed by time, small gifts that once held deep meanings. Her first reaction was to throw everything away, but something stopped her. Those memories, as painful as they were now, were part of who she was. She closed the box and put it back again. Maybe one day she could look at it without feeling that sharp pain in her chest. During the first week of the trip, she felt as if she was still wearing her pain, like a tight outfit she couldn't take off. She carried the past on her back, like a backpack full of stones. But little by little, the different air, the new landscapes and unfamiliar faces began creating spaces within her, small cracks through which light started to enter. On a morning, sitting in front of a silent and vast landscape, mountains in the background, trees dancing with the wind, and a clear sky free of clouds, she remembered how he made her feel small. The times he belittled her dreams, criticized her clothes, or the way she laughed too loudly. She recalled the constant sense of inadequacy, as if she was never good enough, as if she lived trying to reach an unattainable expectation. She felt a wave of indignation, but also relief. She was far from it now. While on a hike, she thought about how the silence there was so different from the silence at home when he was upset. An oppressive silence, laden with guilt. A chasm between the two. There, the silence was freedom. She took a deep breath and smiled. It was the first time her body smiled along. She realized it wasn't her who was wrong. It was the environment she lived in that suffocated her. Caroline watched her friend's transformation with a mix of pride and relief. In the first nights, she still needed to wake up to console her when the nightmares came. Now, she saw Elizabeth waking up before sunrise, eager to explore, with a gleam in her eyes that she hadn't seen in a long time. "You know what hurts me the most?" Elizabeth confided one night, while they watched the stars. "It's not just the betrayal. It's that I lost years trying to be who he wanted me to be. I put my dreams aside, my passion for photography, my desire to see the world." "It's never too late to start over," Caroline replied, squeezing her hand. These little revelations began to take shape in texts. She began to write, first in her diary, then in an improvised blog. Her words, sincere and sensitive, began to touch other people. Comments started to appear, messages from women saying, "It seems like you wrote my story." So she decided to document everything. Photos, short videos, reflections. In a small seaside town, Elizabeth found an old camera in a thrift store. The seller, a gentleman with white hair and a gentle smile, noticed her interest. "This camera belonged to a photographer who traveled the entire world," he explained. "They say she captured not just images, but the soul of places." Was it a salesman's story? Maybe, but believing it did her good. Elizabeth felt an immediate connection with the object. She bought it, even knowing it was an extravagance for her tight budget. That night, she took her first photos. The sea under the moonlight, the narrow alleyways lit by old lanterns, Caroline's face sleeping peacefully. There was something magical in those imperfect images, something genuine that digital photography could not capture. Gradually, the trip stopped being an escape and became a reunion. She discovered the joy of traveling alone, of making decisions for herself, of getting lost and discovering unexpected places. A small cafe with the smell of fresh bread, a conversation with a lady in a local market, a child who offered her a flower for no reason. Little moments that comprised something bigger, a new version of herself. It was during this process of reconstruction that Thomas reached out to her. He sent a long message saying he had broken up with Isabel, that it was a delusion, an impulse that made no sense. He said he missed her, that he now realized how important she was. He painted a future, suggested starting over. He used sweet words, new promises, elaborate apologies. The message was almost poetic. Elizabeth, now more composed, didn't know what to say. For days she thought about the possibility. She remembered the good moments, the old laughs, the trips they took together. But she also remembered the hurts, the silences, the loneliness shared. Nothing was simple. She accepted to have dinner with him, testing her own heart. She dressed slowly, carefully combed her hair, but inside her there was a constant noise of alert. The restaurant he chose was sophisticated, the kind of place they frequented on special occasions. Thomas was thinner, with dark circles under his eyes that revealed sleepless nights. He talked about regret, about how foolish he had been, about how he realized too late what he was losing. "We can rebuild, Lizzie," he said, using the nickname only he used. "It's us. It always has been." But something had changed there. Or rather, something in her had changed. He still used the same expressions, the same gestures, but now they seemed empty, misfitting. What might have charmed her before now seemed rehearsed. She felt uncomfortable, as if she was betraying herself. As if she was trying to fit into a pair of shoes that no longer fit. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her chest was tight, as if the past was trying to steal her breath once again. The next morning, she sent a short message. Direct, without resentment. She said she couldn't start over with him, that she wished him happiness but far from her. He was furious, accusing her of being proud, ungrateful and deluded. He tried to blame her, and there, at that moment, she was certain. She had made the right choice. Finally, the box of memories could be thrown away. She went back to travelling. Now, with the camera in her hands and her heart open, she turned her records into professional content. She created a channel, expanded the blog, and started being invited to speak at events and discussion groups. She left her old job, living from what made her feel alive. Her videos, texts, tips, and encounters along the way. She met inspiring people, incredible places, and above all, she got to know herself. Every new destination was a new part of herself she discovered, a new angle, a new voice. She learned to listen to herself more attentively. She found strength where there was once only fear. She created a community of followers who called her an inspiration, and more than that, she finally felt whole. At a photography festival, she met Miguel, a documentary photographer who had dedicated his life to capturing stories of overcoming challenges around the world. They exchanged experiences, laughed at the same jokes, and shared the same curious outlook on life. There was no rush, no expectations, just two hearts that recognized each other in the simplicity of a prolonged breakfast, a walk without a set destination, conversations that stretched into the early hours. One afternoon, while reviewing old photographs for an exhibition, Elizabeth found an image she had taken on the day she signed the divorce papers. It was a portrait of herself, reflected in the car window, with tear-filled eyes and a defeated expression. Next to this photo, she placed another, taken recently, her smiling openly with the wind tousling her hair and the sun illuminating her face. The two images side by side told a story of transformation that words could never describe with the same intensity. She still believes in love. But now she knows, love is light. It doesn't weigh down. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't diminish. She believes in the love that respects silences, admires the other, adds without subtracting. A love that doesn't bind but walks alongside. That allows for growth, change, being. And the greatest lesson she learned was that sometimes pain is just the beginning, an uncomfortable seed that, when watered with courage, blooms into something new. Sometimes it's necessary to break apart to rebuild in a more truthful way. Life, after all, doesn't end where a cycle closes. It begins again, and often better than before. Years later, upon releasing her book of photographs and texts, Elizabeth revisited the registry office where everything had ended. The place remained the same, grey, formal, with that peculiar smell of old papers. But she was no longer the same. She sat on the same bench where she had signed the divorce papers and took a photograph. A simple image, almost unpretentious, but full of meaning. In the dedication of her book, she wrote, "For everyone who had the courage to close doors, even without knowing what they would find on the other side. And especially for Caroline, who taught me that true friendship is holding your hand while you learn to walk alone again." If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.